Hello everybody, here's another video. In fact, this will be my final video of the decimals edition. So today we're going to be looking at how we could divide decimals, and I'll try to show you like two questions, because division tends to be a bit harder when it comes to decimals work. Okay, now so we're going to first start off with the first example, which is 78.5 divided by 8. So what we're going to do is, when it comes to division of decimals, what I like to do is we're going to be doing the long division. Okay, so what I'll do here is this will be 8 and this will be 78.5. Now this number is actually what we call the divisor, and this number is basically what we call the dividend. And the answer right here is going to be like the quotient. And of course, not forgetting is that you may actually get something what we call the remainder. We'll talk about that shortly. Okay, now, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with 8 and looking at 78, because we can't look at 7 on its own, because 8 is obviously bigger than 7, and you can't take 7 divided by 8 and hoping to get like a nice whole number. So what I'll do is instead I'll be looking at 78. So we know that the closest number that multiplies to 8 giving 78 is going to be 9. Okay, you can actually run through the 8 times table to find out that 8 times 9 is probably the closest. So 78. So this becomes 72. And we know that 78 minus 72, that's 6. I want you to bring the decimal point down. That's 5. We put the decimal point here as well in the quotient. Now, when you do the next long division, the next step of the long division, we're going to be looking at how many 8s go into 65. I would like you to ignore this decimal point for the time being. Okay, so we know that 8 goes into 8 because 8 times 8 is 64, and that's the closest number. And what I'll do is 65 minus 64, that's the remainder, which is 1. Okay, but the thing is, 1 is still too small, because how many 8s actually go into 1? That's not really possible. So what I will do next is, since this doesn't really work out well, what I'll do is I'll bring another imaginary 0 right down, and this becomes 10. And we know that 8 can actually go into 10, which is basically 1, because 1 times 8 is 8, 2 times 8 is 16, so 2 is going to be too big. So 1 is great. I'll put the 8 here. I'll subtract both numbers. So 10 minus 8 is 2. And again, the problem exists again. This is still too small. So what I'll do is I'll bring another 0 right down. Okay? Now, the question is, how many 8s go into 20? That's not too bad, because I know that 2 of my 8s can actually go into 20, because we know that 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24. So we're looking at this guy, okay, which is closest to 20. So I'm going to put a 2 here, and this is going to give me 16. And I'm still having a number which is less than 8. So what I'll do is I'll bring another 0 again, and we look at how many 8s go into 40. But 8 times 5 is 40. So the final answer is just going to be this. This is when the remainder is actually 0. So the answer for this question is just going to be 9.8125. Okay? Now, I hope this helps. And what I'll do is I'll show you another question on dividing decimals. Okay? Now, so let's change the question. And let's try to divide a decimal by another decimal, which might create some kind of confusion as well. Okay? So let's have a look at this, how this actually works. So I'm going to erase all these questions first, and we're going to start afresh. Okay, now let's look at another question on dividing decimals. So what I'll do is, let's keep the numbers a bit smaller. So let's do something like 20.4 divide by maybe 2.5. Okay, and the same thing happens again. All right, even when you divide a decimal by another decimal, what I'll do is I'll treat this question as if there isn't a decimal point. So this literally would be the same thing, because what I'll do is I'll move a decimal point to the right, and I'll move the decimal point 1 to the right, which is essentially just multiplying this by 10 and essentially multiplying this by 10. Okay, so remember, I'm multiplying by 10 on one side, multiplying by 10 on the other side. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to do like long division again. So it's 204. Again, we do the same thing. We got to find out in terms of multiples of 25 or the 25 times table, how many 25s gives me the closest to 204, if it's even possible. Okay, so we know like 25 times 1, that's give me 25. 25 times 2, that gives me 50. So basically each time you're just adding 35. But I realized something is that 25 times 8, that actually gives me 200, which is really close to 204. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put the 8 here. This gives me 200. The remainder is 4. So what I'll do is, again, just like the previous question, I'll bring an imaginary 0 down. Okay, now remember, not forgetting, you need to put a decimal point here as well. Okay, because you added 0 to the second last digit, so you need to add a decimal point. Okay, so how many 25s go into 40? The closest will be 1. So this will be 25, this will be 1, 5. So now the remainder is 15, but this number is still smaller than 25. So every time this number is smaller than the divisor, we're going to add another 0 down again. Now, what we're going to do is we need to find out how many 25s go into 150. And we got one special number here, because 25 times 6, that gives me 150. So we're going to put a 6 here. And this is 150. And this process stops when the remainder is 0. Does that make sense? So basically, the answer for this is just going to be 8.16. And I will encourage you to do this question without decimals right from the first step. Okay? Alright, so I hope this this video of dividing decimals helped. And if you got any other questions, please feel free to write down in the comment section. If you like this video, smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. Alright, take care guys. Alright, I'll see you again.